everyone. So glad to be here in this cool conference, speaking about the way that my team is developing in the day-to-day with Golang, sharing with you the experience that we have in the way that we are working on local development. So before we starting, let me introduce myself. My name is Matan Cohen, and I'm a software development team lead at the production platform in Wix. And my team is called DevExtra Production. We are responsible for the dev experience of the production engineers in the group. We are responsible for some automations and make the life easier, CI/CDs, and a bunch of other stuff. Before that, I've been in WalkMe also for several years. Now, the agenda for today is that we're going to discuss about Skaffold. And Skaffold is this amazing tool made by Google for local Kubernetes development. And we're going to discuss about it, of course, today. And we're going to discuss also about two great integrations that Skaffold have, which is helm and Bazel. Helm for deployment and Bazel as a build tool. And we're going to discuss this as well. Now, let's start from discussing about local development in general. Now, I know that every team or company, doesn't really matter, have its own way how to develop. But in my point of view, you must take into consideration three things when you are thinking about the way that you are going to use the tools. You must have velocity, good experience, and a fast feedback loop. Now, if you would put it on a scala between the way you are working is exactly like production or nothing like production, you can think about it in a very general way in those four options. First of all, you can run your code just via tests. You are running this exact code that you wrote with the test, and you want to see if it's working or not. A second option is running the service. Now, it can be a binary, it can be a Dockerized stuff, whatever. But you are running all the service. Now, something that it's more like production can be like Dockerizing all the environment. When you want to work on your environment, you are going to work with your service and maybe some external dependencies like database or message queues and other stuff. And the third option, it's running all the services with all the stuff, with local full integration. Maybe the environment variables would be a little bit different. Now, when we thought about which way we should take in order to develop in Golang, in our local development experience, we wanted to take into those 3 points that we discussed about velocity, good experience, and fast feedback loop, but also we want to make it as much as possible like production. And now this is where Skaffold helped us with this concept. What is Skaffold actually? Skaffold is a local development Kubernetes tool that you are using in order to run your services. And basically what it does, Skaffold is watching your files, and every change that you are making, it's gonna continuously deploying to your local Kubernetes cluster. Now it can be a remote Kubernetes cluster, but today we're gonna see it like just on local Kubernetes cluster in Docker for Mac. And actually what it does, it's pay attention that you changed your service and then is doing a very fast build of the Docker image, and it pushes it to your Kubernetes cluster. And we're going to see it in a second. Now, when you finish, it's automatically clean up for you. This concept that's called continuous development, now I've seen it in several places, and it's like a general concept, continuous development. But this concept the way that I'm taking this phrase is you want to work continuously when you are developing and get this fast feedback loop inside the Kubernetes cluster, and you constantly deploying your code and getting the feedback. So let's see the first demo very, very fast. Let's take a look how Skaffold can help us with a local development experience. Now, before the demo, I have installed several stuff. First of all, I installed the Docker for Mac, and I enabled Kubernetes. Also, you can install Skaffold very easily with brew install Skaffold. And last thing, I installed a Google Cloud extension on my VS Code, and you can use it also in IntelliJ. Okay, guys, so as I said before the talk, I have installed Docker on the machine, Docker for Mac. And also, I was I enabled a Kubernetes here. I enabled Kubernetes. Now let's see Skaffold in action. Now, in order to have this quick template of how Skaffold is working, let me open this Cloud Code new application. This is an extension that also was made by Google, just to download a template. So it will be Kubernetes application, of course, and we want to have a Go guestbook. So let me open this one. Let's give it a sec. You can see on the bottom right that it's downloading. Cool. Now, this is the template, and this is basically a very simple Skaffold project. Now, this Skaffold project, as you can see here, have two main artifacts, which is the backend and the front end. And if you would go to the Kubernetes manifest, you would see also there is MongoDB. And what Skaffold does is the way that Skaffold is working is that you have two main parts inside Skaffold. You have the build and the deploy. Now, the build phase is, in the build phase, you need to point where are your artifacts. Now, you are pointing on the back end and the front end. Cool. Now, in order to deploy those artifacts, you need to point on the Kubernetes manifests, which is in the Kubernetes manifests directory. So, in order to run Skaffold and see all the magic, you just need to do Skaffold back. And then Skaffold will start running and building the artifacts. And also it will deploy to my local Kubernetes cluster. So let's give it a second. And you can see that those backend and frontend services are being built. Now, because there was, now you can see that it's actually building, because it's the first time it's actually building for me those containers, those images, sorry, and then it will deploy the containers to my local Kubernetes cluster. Now, we are waiting for the deployments to stabilize. Let's give it a second. Because it's the first time, it's taking a little bit more time, but next time it will have cache, of course, and it will be very fast. Let's give it one more second. Just a sec. Okay, now we can see the logs. We can see that we have the backend and the front end logs, and also we can see that MongoDB already deployed. So we can see it. I have a lens, which is local ID for Kubernetes, and you can see in the pods that we have now a Go guestbook backend, front end, and MongoDB, and everything is working. Now let's run on the browser localhost, which is the service that the front end is listening, and then we can see that we have this my guestbook. So now we can write post to guestbook, and then you can see that it's worked. Now, let's see what Skaffold gives us actually. Now, if I'm going to change, for example, you can see here that the name of the app is called My Guestbook. Oops. And if I want to change this, I can, let's search for this one, My Guestbook. Let's call it Conf42 Guestbook. Now, you would see that Skaffold noticed that just the front end need to be built, and it's automatically rebuild our front end, and it's already been deployed to our Kubernetes cluster. Now, if I would go to Lens, you would see that now we have a new pod with a new front-end pod. It was very fast. I don't know if you catched it. And actually, now we have a new application with a new deployment, and we can refresh. And now we have Conf42. Now we change just the front end. Now let's do something a little bit different. Let's change. Let's add a backend stuff or a method in the main window. Now let's see the handlers here, and you can see that it's using this HTTP handler. So let's create another one. Let's call it. Let's have a ping. Okay. Now you can see that it's automatically paying to the builds, and it rebuilds for every change that I'm doing. So let's create this function called ping, and let's just return, just a second. Oops. Oh, now let's give it a second and let it finish to be deployed. And that's it. Now we can do /ping hopefully, and it will work as expected. Okay, now it's worked. We can see that probably it took a second for the service to be stabilized, and that's it. Now it's been redeployed. So the thing is that when I'm working with Skaffold, it's always rebuild the environment that I'm working. It doesn't really matter if it's front-end code or back-end code, and even Kubernetes stuff. So if I would go here and I would go to the front-end service, for example, and I would change it from 8080 to, for example, 3000, it will also will pay attention to that, and it will be very fast deployed. You would see, you could see that because it was not a change in the artifact, it was like amazingly fast. So if I would go now to the browser, it should not be worried. Just a sec. It took it a second to pay attention to it. Now we can change it to 3000. Oops, what I've done here. Oh, I changed the backend. Sorry for that. Let's change the front end. Okay, now it will be now it will work. Just one sec. Okay, and now it's working on local 3000. And probably you are asking yourself, I can't hear you, but I'm imagine, how can I debug inside Scaffold? Because there is part of the local experience is to have a great debug tool. Now, you can do also with the Scaffold a remote debug inside the Kubernetes cluster. And let's see how it looks like. You can see you have run on Kubernetes. By the way, if you would go to the VS Code, you can check the configurations. So let's run on Kubernetes. Now it will redeploy a new pods in order to do the remote debugging. So yes, and I'm gonna wait for a second to wait it for to work. Now it's building the front end again, and it will deploy to my local Kubernetes cluster. Okay, cool. It's finished with the front end. Now it's building the back end. And in the meanwhile, I would go to the front end app, and let's search for the post. Let's debug the post process end to end from the front end to the back end. So I would go to the back end as well, and let's search for the post message handler. Okay. So I created two breakpoints. Now I'm waiting for a Skaffold for the first time to build those remote debugging containers pods. So we're gonna wait until it's gonna say that it was finished. Let's give it another second. Okay, now we are doing the mapping inside the remote debugging, and hopefully now everything will be working. Now let's try to add something here, post a guest loop, and the debug didn't started yet. Let's see why. Let's try again. Okay, and now you can see that I'm on the front-end app, and I have a breakpoint. And now I can jump over the lines and debug like I wanted to. And if I would go play, I would go to the backend app, as you can see. Now, giving me the ability to do a debugging cross microservices, which is amazing. And this is one of the things that Skaffold give me on my local experience working with Go. Cool. So let's continue. Okay, so I'm just cleaning up the stuff, and also in the terminal here, and clean up everything. And Skaffold, when you are finishing with Skaffold, is cleaning up for you. So it's very, very cool. You can see that everything is cleaned when I finished. Cool. Actually, what Skaffold gave us is the way Skaffold worked is it's pluggable. Now, I don't know if you noticed, but the parts in the Skaffold YAML file are very easy to extend. For example, if you want to use another build tool, it's Skaffold give you the ability to choose which build tool you want to use. Now you can use the local Docker daemon that you have, like I just did, but you can use other way to build your artifacts, like Bazel, for example, and we're gonna see it later on. Also, it gives you a few options how you want to deploy your artifacts to the Kubernetes that you are using. Now, it can be in kubectl, like we just saw, but we can use Helm, for example, and we're going to discuss this as well. So Skaffold is very pluggable, which you can use it in different places, in different teams, in other ways, which is very useful. Now, let's say that you have this microservice that you are working on, but you need an external dependency. For example, you need a message bus, or you need, for example, a MySQL database or something like that. And this is where Helm getting into the picture. Now we're going to discuss how we can use Helm to integrate with Skaffold in order to help us in the deployment phase. So what is Helm in general? Helm is the Kubernetes package manager most that is commonly used when you are using Kubernetes. Actually, what it means, like you can do npm install something, or use other package managers like Nugget and C# or pip in Python, doesn't really matter. You can use Helm for Kubernetes. So you can do like Helm install MySQL, and then you have MySQL in your Kubernetes cluster, which is very, very cool. This is a very high level of Helm. Now, let's see how Helm can integrate with Skaffold and how easy it is working with Skaffold and Helm. By the way, for those of you who don't know, Helm, there is something called Helm Hub, which you changed the name to Artifact Hub. And here you can search for all the artifacts that you want to install via Helm. So for example, we were going to go for PostgreSQL, for example. And you can see here, if you want to use Helm, you can just do helm repo add for this repo, and then you can do helm install, for example, for that. So now let's write this in our Skaffold project that we just created. So I'm returning to the project that we just saw. And now we can, inside the Skaffold here, let's have another file. Let's call it Skaffold services.yaml, for example. And here, I have an extension here for writing in Skaffold. It's also the cloud code. And now I would go for Skaffold Helm deployment. And you can see that it gave me a cool template out of the box. So let's remove all of this for now. And the chart path would be, now the values, I don't need those values as well. And also I don't need this build artifact. I just want to have here pass address. And the chart path will be, let's take it from here. I already done this before the talk, so after you run it, it will be very easy to use. So we're going to use it here, and we should say that this chart is remote. So let's say true. Now, in order to use it, we can just run Skaffold. Now, I will not run Skaffold dev this time. Now I will just do, oops, I haven't closed it before. Now we can use Skaffold run. Now the difference between Skaffold dev and Skaffold run is Skaffold dev is like watching your files, but Skaffold run is not watching your files. It's like one-time deployment. So you can do Skaffold run to Skaffold services. Oops. Skaffold services YAML minus F. If you are not using Skaffold.yaml, you must pass the minus F. Oops, Skaffold run minus F. And now you would see that Skaffold is using Helm to deploy this service to my local Kubernetes cluster. Now, you can see that this is a regular Helm install if you're familiar with it. And what can actually we do is actually connecting to this Postgres very, very easily. And for example, if we want to have a few other stuff, let's say, for example, that I'm using Kafka, for example. So I can have here Kafka, and I think it would be Kafka again. And also, if you're using Redis, you can do this as well. I mean, you should change the parameters and like pass maybe a different port, so you want to have some reverse proxy for the URL or something, but you get the idea. So here you can have Redis, for example, and if I would run Skaffold run again, now I'm going to have Redis, Kafka, and Postgres like very, very easily, which is giving me so much power when I'm working locally. So if I would check this inside Lens, you would see that Kafka is starting and Zookeeper as well, and also Redis master and Redis slave. Of course, you must do some fine tunings to the parameters that you are passing, but this is the general idea of how Skaffold integrating with Helm, which can help us a lot in the way we are working with external stuff. Now let's clean everything here. We can run Skaffold. Instead of run, we can run Skaffold delete. Skaffold delete minus F. Skaffold. Cool. Now we can clean up everything, and you would see that all the things here are gonna be removed in a few seconds. You can see that the pods are terminating, and we finished. Cool. So after we saw how Skaffold is integrating with Helm, let's check out another amazing tool that's called Bazel, and how it's integrating with Skaffold. Now, Bazel is, in general, is agnostic build tool, and also made by Google. And I think in Google, internally in Google, it's called Blaze. And what actually Bazel gives us is this very efficient way that it builds the artifacts. And we're going to see it in a few seconds. In very general idea, you're going to have on each directory a Bazel file that you can connect between the artifacts, each directory having its own Bazel file. And then when you want to build the artifact, it's building it very, very efficiently. And in the tree that you can see here, it's have a cache for each layer in the tree, meaning that if you already have it cached, Bazel will not build it again. And we are using Bazel a lot in Wix. And for example, there are some groups that use most of the groups in Wix on the backend using Scala. And when they moved to Bazel, it changed the time that they are doing the CI of building all the artifacts and the CD from hours to minutes. So it's amazing tool in a very large monorepos and big repos. So the things we're gonna discuss now is that what Bazel gives us. I mean, in the local dev experience, why it's helpful. So let's say that we have two services, right? We have service one and service two. Very easy. Now, service one is dependent on a very simple sum package, and service two is dependent on sum and mul packages. Now, if I'm changing just service one, so we saw that this before. Skaffold already knows to change service one. Now, and if you're changing service two, again, it will rebuild service two and redeploy it. But what's going to happen if I'm changing the dependencies of those services? How Skaffold or any other tool is knowing which service you need to build. So for example, if I'm changing the mul package, so of course I need to build just service two. And if I need to, if I'm changing the code of the sum package, then I should rebuild service one and service two. And because of the power of Bazel, Bazel knows, because of all the targets, which packages and services I should build in the local experience, in the local development. And this is improved dramatically the local experience of the way that I'm working. So let's see in action Skaffold and Bazel together. Okay, so let's see how Skaffold is integrating with Bazel. So before the demo, I created this very simple project, includes Bazel and Go in Skaffold. So let's see how this project is looked like. We have again this Skaffold file, which contains the main parts, which is build and deploy. And the deploy is via kubectl. And the build now, as you can see here, it's made via Bazel. Now, let's open the directories and see what this project contains. So as we saw in the slide, we have two services and two packages, which service one is dependent on the sum package, very easy one, and service two is depends on mul and sum. Now, as you can see here, each directory holds a Bazel file, which declare the targets inside the directory. You can see here. We will not cover it in this talk, but in general, you're not writing those Bazel files. Is generating with a tool that's called Bazel, which generating it for you. Now, if I want to run this this project, we will do as we've done before, Skaffold dev. As you can see here, that service one and service two already been it's in the cache, and that's it. They have been deployed. Now, if we're changing service one, it will be very. I mean, we know that just service one needs to be redeployed. So you can see here that service one is now rebuild and will redeploy again. But what's going to happen, and if we're going to change the dependencies, the modules, and this is where Bazel can help us, and in other places, in the local experience, of course. So let's change this package here, and let's see what's happening. Because service one and service two is dependent on this package, Skaffold knows to build them. And this is where Bazel gives the strength to Skaffold in this situation. And if I would change the multiplier, for example, you would see that only service two that's rely on the multiple package will be changed. And this gives a lot of strength to Skaffold into the local development experience. So with Skaffold, it feels like you're writing code in production. I mean, if before people worked with Dockerizing their environments in order to be like production, now we can actually work with Kubernetes and Helm and some other tools that can make my local experience like a production, which give me a lot of strength. So thank you very much for your time. You can ask me questions on Twitter. I will be glad to answer. And that's it. Thank you very much, everyone.